Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the August 21st, 2018 special board meeting of the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. By way of announcements, I'd like to advise the public of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcast. By way of attendance, we have all board members present except for Mr. Earnshaw. We have Ms. Cancro on the phone. We are missing Mrs. Hull, and we have Mr. Navarrete on video. So that, I think I got everybody. Recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Ms. President. This evening we have one item on the agenda for consideration by the board at this special meeting. This evening we have Mr. Fretz, Director of Facilities, here with some of our project management consultants to talk about a matter regarding the Methacton High School change order number 1, which is a roofing removal and replacement at the high school gymnasium roof. Mr. Fretz?
Yes, good evening. Tonight we're here, as Dr. Zerbe said, to talk about some roof replacement above the main gym. It's actually the deck replacement. We had roof replacement in the construction project. And tonight I have our consultant, MJ Sobek, and also Fidavia here to discuss it. We had encountered some unsuitable roof deck locations above the gym that are in need of replacement, and that's why they're here. So, thank you. Mark, if you could elaborate on that, please.
Yes, the roof deck is a lightweight concrete. It's called gypsum, and it's a kind of material that if it gets wet repeatedly, it starts to get soft and becomes an unsuitable substrate to put materials on. And you really can't tell until you get the roof off, because in this case there were 2 layers of old tar roofing on there. And they call it built-up roofing. It's layers of tar, paper, and asphalt. So each one was a half-inch thick. So together it was an inch. So it's kind of like walking on pavement. So when we walked on it, always felt structurally sound everywhere we walked around. But when the roof came up, our inspector right here, Dave Thatcher, pointed out that he found soft areas in the deck that were not suitable for putting roofing on and not suitable to last the length of this new roof that we're putting on. So those areas have to be removed and replaced with the same material that gets poured in place. So they have to take it down. There's structural beams called bar joists going across, and then there are inverted T's going across, which are like a ceiling grid, only bigger and stronger. So you have to take it down to those T's and then drop in panels, and then put down a wire mesh and tie it into the mesh around the sound deck area, and then pour new gypsum on top of it, let it set up 24 hours, temporarily protected from the weather, and then put the brand new roofing material on the next day, and then you'll be set permanently. There is no nice way to do it, and it's very unpredictable. I've been doing this for 42 years, and sometimes I'll go years without seeing any bad gypsum deck, and sometimes I'll find buildings that have 80% bad deck. In this case, we have about 850 square feet of bad deck, and but you can't, when you start to tear it off, you have to tear back till you find sound deck. So Dave walked around and felt with it and so on. Dave's been doing this for 42 years like me. He's pretty sure he knows where the limits are, but he can't tell from the top how far they have to go to get to the next piece of steel. So the contractor ordered enough to do 1,500 square feet, because like I said, you can't run down to the corner grocery store and buy these products. You have to have them on hand. So that would be a total of 1,500 square feet, the potential. We're thinking that it might be somewhere between the 800 and the 1,500. It might fall in the middle, but we can't guarantee it. But there will be 1,500 square feet on hand. And at the unit price of $100 a square foot, that would be $150,000. So if it comes in less, or it comes in at the 850 square feet, it'd be $85,000. If it's a midpoint, it might be $120,000, or potentially as high as $150,000. And if you hope for the best, hopefully these areas will be within the limits that Dave found them.
One thing I wanted to also point out with Mark is, as I was told from Dave, it's important, it's not just the gyp deck, it's the wire that's in the gyp deck. We need to go back and find good wire, because this is much like rebar, the wire has to be tied. So you have to get to good wire, and that every time you just can't, find that. They have to find and probe to find those areas. So that's another reason why, it's an unforeseen condition and to be determined in the field as we go. Sorry.
Yep, sorry. And the wire is what holds it together. Cementitious products like concrete are very strong in compression. So if you had a column made out of concrete, you pushed on, it's very strong. But if you tried to pull it and break it apart, it would break apart pretty easily. That's why you need reinforcing wire or rebars in there to keep it together when it's in tension versus compression.
Are there questions from the members of the board regarding the scope of work that needs to be completed here, and why, and the amount of money that is being recommended? Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, I guess, Mark, I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but this section of roof was replaced as part of the summer project, correct?
Yes.
So if we had people crawling all over this roof beginning earlier in the summer, how did we not identify it until the roof was completed?
Because of the rigidity of having two old built-up roofs on there, like I said, it's like an inch of pavement on there. It was so thick, you just couldn't tell underneath. If it was a single-ply membrane like rubber or plastic, you would feel it under your feet. But that is, when you cut it up, it's like lifting concrete. It's so heavy. And that's when they discovered it, when they tore that off.
Okay, thank you.
Just, I understand that we went to the $200,000 and the actual, to be on the high side, sounds like on the high side is really 150. Just curious, was the not replacement of the roof the cause for why, if this was, the roof should have been repaired 5 years ago? I'm just trying to understand, is that more, if the roof had been replaced at its normal time of life, would we have this problem with the gypsum?
Well, it's hard to say, because the roof that was put over the roof, I'm not sure how long ago it was on this building, but that could have been put over the roof that was already defective underneath with the deck, but they didn't know it because they didn't tear off. They went right over the old roof. So these soft spots could date back 20, 25 years ago, and then the second roof went over it until you tear off. And code says if you have two roofs or more, you have to tear off to the deck. That's why, according to code, the last time they could put a roof over a roof, this time it had to come off.
I don't really have a question. I was at the property committee meeting, but I wanted to thank you for coming here and explaining it, because it was, it's a large sum of money, and we wanted to make sure we, answered everybody's questions appropriately. So thank you for coming, and
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Questions, Kim?
So when you're replacing the gypsum, is there any concern? You said it takes about 24 hours for it to cure. Is this, like other concrete materials, the elements and the environmental conditions at the time that you're replacing it, is that going to be an issue if we have unforeseen weather?
They have to make it weather tight every night, so they're going to cut a section of the roofing that's on there now. They have the white roofing on there. They're going to cut it like a U, fold it back, do the work, and then put that U-shaped piece back on again and seal it overnight. And then 24 hours later, it's done enough and hardened enough to work on. Then they'll peel that back open again and then put the permanent roofing down and finish the job, but it will not be left open overnight.
And there's no concern about temperature fluctuations and how that'll affect it
It
at
just
all?
wouldn't be able to freeze within 24 hours, and
Right.
hopefully we're way
Yeah,
ahead
I
of
don't
that.
think we have to worry about that right now.
But the crazy weather we've had this year, who knows?
And then if we do come in less than the 1,500 square feet and we have excess material, is there a credit? Are we able to return it, or is this, once you buy it, you own it and that's it?
I'm not sure, to speak for the contractor. There might be a restocking charge. I'd admit, pretty much anything can be returned if you pay a restocking charge, but I haven't asked the contractor that.
Okay, thank you.
I had the same question as Kim about returning the material if we have excess material. I just was curious about, So I'm just trying to understand your description of the construction. So are we removing the joist also? Are they?
No, the steel bar joists will stay, and they're about every 6 feet, and they're deep, they're open web joists. And then across that, they actually put T's that look like this,
Okay.
inverted T's, but they're much heavier, and they get welded the other direction. And then the panels are originally dropped in as a form board, and then they would pour and float all this gypsum on top of it.
Okay, thank you. And then I just was wondering, the 850 square feet that you found that is bad, it represents what percentage of the total roof that we have?
So it's 10,000 square feet.
10%.
So, yeah, 8%, 8.5%.
Okay, thank you.
Jen, do you have any questions? Ms. Kemp?
Not all those, no, not at this time, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? When we were preparing for the agenda this evening, we did talk about, being as conservative, making sure that we had the right number in here, not necessarily knowing exactly what is entailing. So, the 200,000 is much larger than Mr. Sobek's talking about, where it could be 85 to 150. I just want to make sure the board's comfortable with the 200,000. We can make it whatever number you need, but I think that ultimately what we're saying is, we have to do this roof. I think it's also important, Mr. Fretz, if you could you explain the timeline on this and what your expectations are, because I think that's another important matter.
Yes. So first, we had to procure the material, which we're in the process of doing, and expect that to be coming in Friday. And then the contractor, while they have other work scheduled, we needed to get it on their schedule. They can be here Tuesday. So that we're anticipating a Tuesday start on this work, provided we have good weather, and we need a 5-day duration for the anticipated square feet that we have right now. That's what's projected. So obviously, weather plays a big part of this, that we can be able to keep working and get it done. We know that it will go into the start of
The key piece of information that the board should know, and we've been in contact with the building principal, but this will go into the start of the school year, and we will take all the necessary precautions, especially when there may be cranes being used, and we will vacate the areas underneath and around those areas, similar to what we've been doing, all summer long through the project when cranes and other heavy equipment were being utilized. So it will likely require some reshuffling of students throughout the day at various times, but I think we can coordinate that well and make it as least disruptive as possible.
I have a couple more questions. One is, I just want to confirm that the $100 a square foot, that includes the cost of materials as well as installation, the labor. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so if someone could just look into the process of being able to return the excess material and just let us know that, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Seeing no other comments or questions from the board, I will open this up to public comment on board action items. Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I first heard sketchy details of this change order at the Property Committee meeting this month. Certainly the work has to be done. I hear this evening that over the top of this suspect area, there is the white material, which is some kind of insulation. Is that correct?
The white material, there's white roofing on top, the waterproof membrane, that's white TPO.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, then under that, there's insulation boards, and then the light.
So are those in place today?
The TPO roofing is there right now, but that's what they're going to cut and fold back. It's like
Okay.
a 60 mil sheet of plastic they'll fold back.
Okay. So, presumably the crews are trying to be done some number of days ago, and then this material got discovered. Now, we've had a roofing consultant, and I understand that cores were taken. I'm wondering how many cores were taken over the 10,000 square feet? In other words, this area that at the property committee meeting, the statement was made that no cores were taken in this area, yet it was 10% of the total job in the area. So, it seems to me someone has some liability for the inspection process which included the coring. So I think that there's some liability that needs to be fairly assessed. Whether that's AEM, Fidavia, Sobek, Methacton, I don't know, but I think that seems to me some adequate process was lacking there. Also, at the appropriate time, I'd like to speak to the lack of a courtesy of the floor at this meeting. It seems to me that's a violation of the Sunshine Act, and there needs to be some discussion of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Bickelman.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. So we have this figure, the low figure of 800 square feet. Hopefully when we start tearing off the decking, hopefully there are individuals like Mr. Fretz, Fidavia, maybe other people that represent the school district's money to be up there to compare as they rip the 1,000 or the 1,200 square feet or the 1,400 square feet that compare those new areas that they're looking at to the ones they know about, so that as we go from $80,000 to $120 to $150 to $199,000.99, hopefully there's somebody there that compares the upper end work to the lower end work that we know needs to be done, so that we can make sure we're getting what we need. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bickelman. Dr. Malik.
Jim Malik, Worcester. Mr. Andrews, I guess, indicated we've known about this for some time. Is that true? Back to Property Committee?
I believe this was discussed at the Property Committee meeting, yes.
So this is no big surprise, right? I guess my question is, who scheduled this special meeting tonight? Was this you or Dr. Zerbe?
This was Dr. Zerbe and myself scheduled this.
Because where is everybody? We got 4 people absent. So it's not like this is some big surprise. What, everybody's sick? Or nobody can do their job? This is the second time now we have a major issue and we got 4 board members absent. What's the story? Everybody, what, in the hospital? Very disappointing, again. Who evaluated this job initially? Who bid it? Who bid this job?
There's a lot of contractors.
Well, who's the one that found this up there? Who found it?
Dr. Malik, I'm not sure that I understand what your question is.
Who found this problem up there on the roof?
Our inspector, Dave Thatcher, right there.
Okay. They found it, and that's why we're doing this change order for $200K? Is that why?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Can you guarantee now that we're not going to find any more areas like this?
All the areas were found by our inspector, Dave, by personally examining it. Dave does have 42 years' experience in this.
Oh, I understand that. Can you guarantee now?
Dr. Malik, please direct your questions.
I
up
got
here.
5 minutes. 4 minutes. Well, I got to talk to somebody who has knowledge. You don't have any knowledge. You haven't been up on the roof. Who's been up on the roof and found the problem? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Has
Dr. Malik, I'm not asking them to provide us with any guarantees this evening. We're voting on a change order.
Well, how many change orders are we going to vote on?
I believe this is change number 1.
I understand that. And I'm looking for change order 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's why I'm asking the guy with knowledge. So somebody went up. How was this found? Was this a general inspection of the entire roof or just one specific area?
Am I allowed to answer questions? Okay. It was found every day they tear up a section of the roof.
Right.
Dave would inspect the whole deck.
Right.
Any soft spots, he would draw them on a map and locate them with dimensions. And then they roofed over it to temporarily keep the water tight, so they couldn't tear into it every day and
Right.
make a water pipe. So then he documented it, and then when they were all added up, he drew them on the roof plan. And
Right. So what's going to happen is you're going to go up again and tear off another section of the roof, possibly.
Oh, no, it's all been torn off.
Oh, it's all torn off. So we're pretty
This
sure.
Except what he can't see through the deck and see exactly where the steel lies. So if he knows it was bad in this area, the next steel might be here. So they might have to extend it a little bit.
Okay.
So that's what we don't know. If you get lucky, it'll line up with the steel. If you get unlucky, you have to move it a couple feet.
So we may see something. It's possible. I have another question about a statement made by the superintendent referring to the monetary figure, and you said you can make the number whatever you want? What's that about?
Was that statement made this evening?
Yeah, I'm in the back listening to it. You can make the number whatever you want. Can they make the number whatever they want?
No, the motion as it's written here is not to exceed $200,000.
I understand that. I'm just asking him. He said you can make the number whatever you want. I'm just asking whether they can or not.
The item before the board is what's written on the agenda.
Okay, so you're just going to leave it at 200K, right? 200,000?
That's what the agenda says.
Okay. So you're pretty confident at this point that we're good with the roof at this point? Or you think we could find anything else up there?
No, except we won't find any more soft deck, but we just don't know where the steel lines are.
So it's possible we could get steel problems up there?
Not the steel problem, no, just lining up with the steel. When they cut the deck, they have to cut it over a structural member.
Yeah.
So like Dave, when he saw these spots, he can't see through this much lightweight concrete, so we don't know where the steel is.
Right.
So that's where we have to, that's where the fluctuation could come in.
What do you think that could cost, if it's a problem?
Well, that's what we're saying, the 850 square feet, they ordered 1,500 square feet to play it safe.
Yeah.
But hopefully they won't need that much. And again, that $100 a square foot is not the material, that's labor, everything. So the material cost is a small part of that $100 a square foot. So, but I will get back to you and find out if it can be returned with a restocking truck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment on board action items this evening? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to approve change order number 1 in the amount not to exceed $200,000 for the removal and replacement of gypsum decking on the high school gymnasium roof by contractor D.A. Nolt? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Winters? And we'll do a roll call vote this evening. Since we have varying attendance, we'll start here with Ms. Drummond.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Ms. Cancro?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I stopped counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 votes in favor, and so the motion carries. I know that there was a comment about courtesy of the floor not being on the agenda, and that is because we have a meeting immediately following this that has courtesy of the floor as part of the meeting. So may I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Reese, second Mr. Ryan. Meeting adjourned.
So we'll stay just in case. We'll stay just in case.
All right, after that brief intermission, I'd like to call to order the August 21st, 2018 work session of the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. For attendance, we have all board members except for Mr. Earnshaw, Ms. Cancro, Ms. Hull. We have Mr. Navarette still available by video conference. Thank you, Mr. Navarette. Recognition of guests and scheduled speakers, Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Ms. President. This evening, there are no guest or scheduled speakers. That takes us on to reports at next week's meeting. The respective chairs will report out on their committees. There are a number of advisements. In fact, that list may grow between now and our next meeting. Just a word of some information that, this is one of the most challenging times of the school year as we're trying to deal with, making sure that we have all the staffing in place, and you'll see a number of matters under personnel that Mr. Regina will be going over this evening. But some of these things will also play into account where, as we get closer to the wire, staff that we're looking to hire might have might already be holding positions with other districts, and therefore, we might be in a position where, the other district could hold them for 60 days until such time, and therefore, you might see some long-term substitutes having to come forward. But we'll keep you apprised of all that, and we have some enrollment figures to share with you later this evening. We'll go through public comments on the action items, the board meeting minutes, and then we'll move on to fiscal. Mr. Bricker this evening, he'll not only talk about the fiscal items and answer any of your questions that you may have, but at the end of that, I ask him to just give a brief summary of where we are with transportation, specifically some of the feedback we're getting in the call center. So he'll share that this evening as well. Mr. Bricker?
Tonight for you, we have the list of bills that are attached, as well as, the treasurer's report. There are no budgetary transfers for the first 3 months. There's no budgetary transfers allowed. Do we have any questions on that before I go to transportation?
Mr. Navarrete, no? Anyone else on this side? On this side? Okay. You want to lead on with transportation, please?
Sure. So far, we had roughly about 120 calls come in. The call center has been staffed with 2 to 3 individuals from about 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. The call center participated in training last week where they were oriented to the call center and provided with scripts and other information to assist them with being responsive and efficient as possible. All calls were being tracked, and a document includes identification for the family, student, name, address, and phone number, as well as a categorization of the issue that's being reported and the priority for response. For example, families do not have transportation due to recent enrollment, split custody matters that need to be addressed within the child's transportation schedule, and child care needs are a first priority at this time. Of the calls taken to date, a majority, 40%, are related to concerns associated with the location of bus stops. These are mostly comprised of families who wish to request a stop closer to their home or switch to another bus stop. About 30% are changes in information. These include child custody or care, such as daycare, and affect transportation, a change in school of attendance, or requests for changes to a different bus route. About 20% of the students need transportation established due to recent enrollment, specifically with the private and parochial school information. Finally, about 10% of the related concerns are about the length of the bus ride. Currently, we have about 92 open items that are individually unique items that we are tracking. Even though there's 120 calls, there's only 92 unique items. Most of these have been resolved at this point in time. Out of the 92, we've worked through 73 of them. 73 of them. There will be calls back to the parents tomorrow as we went through those changes today and addressed them. Some of them were, can I get, like some of the stops have 4 stops at the same place with different buses because there's too many students, so can I be on bus 1 stop versus a bus 3 stop at the same location? The biggest issue that we've been dealing with is the enrollment with the private schools, not informing us of all the students that have been enrolled and adding them in.
Questions for Mr. Bricker on transportation?
I have a question.
I'm sorry.
What is the turnaround time that you aim for to get back to the parents with the answer?
Well, I would say 48 hours because we started this yesterday. We just started getting through them. A lot of them came overnight yesterday, so it's not really a fair statement to say we could get them there. We'll need a day to review the information. It's not that you just make a random change or anything. We do assess it. We do look at each route. We do review it. We've cut down ride times drastically. We found some inefficiencies when looking at them. We haven't always been able to make the changes that parents are requesting, but we have done our best to accommodate them where appropriate. So 48 hours is typically where we are, 72 on the outside. Some of them could take longer, though.
Okay, and I guess so you're saying most of these messages are left on a voicemail, that you're not talking to the...
At night, they'll leave it. There's a voicemail message. We clean that out in the morning. That's why we had 51 of them last night, so we cleaned most of those out this morning, and that's the ones we're working through today.
I guess when someone calls in, are you able, or do you try to give them an expectation of when their matter might be resolved if they actually call in?
That's at the call center. I don't think they do at that point in time because each one would be unique. I think to give them a generic answer probably would be in error, but typically 48 hours turnaround should be reasonable.
Okay, and then the ones that are still outstanding, are they given like an update? Or the ones that have not been resolved yet? I guess my question is, do they?
I'm hoping to have them resolved by tomorrow morning.
Okay. So, but I guess my question is, if something seems outstanding for a while,
Yes,
are there updates given?
Yes, I've personally called some of the parents and let them know what's going on. I've helped reroute some of the stuff. So, yeah, we're making good communication with that.
Okay.
Tomorrow will be how many parents we can get back to. There's also times that we're calling parents and the numbers that they provided are not working, full voicemail.
Okay.
So we are leaving as many messages as we can to get back to them. If they do call back in the call center people can look at the notes and then respond to them the same way that if we were going to give them a response, the same notes would be in the call center notes that they have access to.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions, Mike?
Just one question. In regards to the 40% that you're labeling as location-type calls, can you give us a feel for, are they tending to be the preference of the parents for where they would like the location, or are there true safety concerns? Just, throughout the community, you kind of hear a little bit of both. I just want to see if there's predominantly one way or the other, or...
I would say that most of the parents, when they're calling in, feel that it is a safety concern or a convenience concern for them. However, not all of them do meet that. When there is a safety concern, we do reroute and make a change for the student. Especially, we'll look at it. Karen's familiar with the school district and the roads, really helps out with knowing whether or not it's a safe road or not. We've actually had the safety crew go out and inspect some of the stops to make sure and see whether or not two of the apartment complexes had asked for the bus to drive through their apartment complex, making it easier for the students. Looks like a great idea until you try and get a 72-passenger bus through this apartment complex, then it doesn't work. I don't want to belittle anyone's concern about asking for a stop removed, but I would say 25% of them are probably real safety concerns that we've made changes to.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, so you said that in terms of making the ultimate determination there, it's either Karen or you're sending out some version of a safety group?
So the ultimate decision will come from the school district on whether or not it will be changed or not. So First Student has a safety evaluation team that they'll go out and evaluate a stop. They'll go out to the stop, they'll verify whether or not the stop is safe. There's a form they can fill out if it needs that much. The apartment complexes have not needed those forms. It was pretty evident to see whether a bus could get through that. And they were just asking if the bus could loop around. It wasn't like making stops in the apartment complex. So that would be done by First Student Safety Team, because they have to evaluate the stop and the bus's ability to make their changes. They'll send that recommendation to us, and then we'll review it and then go with that. Typically, we do accept their recommendations.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, Tim, I know you're just coming back. I don't know if you have any comments around the overcapacity potential at the high school in Arcola that was mentioned at the property meeting.
Yeah, I did read about that. We're going to be checking the report tomorrow and updating it. For the last 2 days, we've been going through a lot of the different changes that have been either emailed to me or logged in the call center and making sure the flow's been working well with that. So the last 2 days, I basically have done transportation. We will be updating the report. We'll assess those, and then we'll be working to change some of those as possible.
As a follow-up to that, as one of the things we discussed previously was the flexibility of First Student on the size of the bus. So I realized that we don't have a lot of the larger size buses, but I imagine First Student has access to those that could possibly resolve if we do have any capacity issues.
I think we could talk to them into swapping out a 72 or an 81 or something like that. I don't think that would be a major issue, but I'd have to check their contract and their abilities to do that.
I hope it should be in the contract, because that was one of the arguments for First Student in the beginning, the flexibility.
Mr. Navarrete, did you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask the same question that Paul asked about the follow-up on the high school capacity. I'll add his comments about the advantage of them, that they should be able to swap out these buses. By contract, they have to meet a capacity requirement and a limit on the number of buses. I think it's 94. contract, so that is specified. But thanks, Tim, for providing the information tonight on the call center. I look forward to hearing what next week's update would be.
I would just verify it. I'm not saying it's not in the contract. I would, before I say yes, I would want to read it first, just to make sure.
But I think what the members of the board are referring to is that there was a report that was provided to the board as a summary update about, ride times and capacity, and we need to relook at that to make sure that the calculations that were presented on that sheet actually reflect what is going to be done. So, and just to be clear and transparent in this conversation, the manufacturer might have a bus capacity of, say, 72 passengers, where we would say that for a high school run, that would mean that instead of having, that's 3 per seat for 72, we would have 48, which would be, the math is 3 divided into 72 times 2 gets you the capacity, knowing that our high school and intermediate school students are larger in size and would be able to ride our buses more appropriately with 2 per seat rather than 3 per seat, and then the elementary being calculated at about 2.5 per student, and that's all outlined in the contract with First Student, and it's been our practice to hit those targets for the last couple of years. So we'll be updating that report and sharing that with the board as soon as we can get that. But I think what Tim is really sharing is that he's trying to address the issues in these first 2 days, making sure that things are processing as rapidly as possible, and then we'll get to the reports for the board. All right.
Yeah, I just want to add, the comments that I've heard in the community so far of those with issues has been very positive about the communication and the responsiveness. So I realize that's before school starts and it changes next Wednesday. But we appreciate you and your crew tackling it and professionally and making sure that the communication takes a step up this year. Thank you.
One of the other things that we're going to be doing after the school year settles down and we get past it is Karen and I have talked about going through every single route and reviewing the path, not just the stops and the order, but the actual path that's set up in the route, and using that to clean up some of that information, because the driver will run the right route, but the path, we want to make sure that the path's right, so that each year that we have to do it, it's less problems that we have for the school district.
I just wanted to reiterate real quick what Paul said. I've heard a lot of positive things, and then anybody that did have a problem, as soon as they called, it was fixed, so that's great. And I don't want to get into too many details, but there seemed to have been a glitch with at least a handful of people on Germantown Pike, and we don't need to get into the details, but my only fear, and I'm just trying to let you know while we're here, is anybody who hasn't checked yet, maybe they were on vacation, or that child is older, and they don't, the day before, because, it's a 10th grader, and we've been through this, so I don't know if there's a way to double-check those. There seems to have been a problem with people who lived on one side of Germantown Pike in the GPS. So just an FYI, I don't know how possible that is, but my big fear is that those last-minute people all of a sudden realize, so just something to put in the back of your mind. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions on transportation? Any other comments on any matters for fiscal? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is personnel, item 10. Mr. Regina.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. We're going to go through a couple of the items here specifically. We'll start with the resignations. And for the board's consideration, I know that there was a board request also to talk through why some of the resignations happened. So we're able to share that with the board also this evening. Item A, we have one item for resignation, and that individual had a career opportunity in another state, so it moved on. Resignations for classified. The first one, a career opportunity also, and the second one will be subbing for us, was interested in moving to a part-time position. Item C, we have 2 items for the board's consideration. Letter D, we have 6 items for the board's consideration. Item E, we have 2 items. Item I, we have 1 item. Item J, we have 3 items for the board's consideration. Letter K, we have 1 item. Letter L, we have 10 items for the board's consideration. Letter M, we have 1 item. Letter N, we have 1 item. Letter O, we have 1 item. And letter P, we have 1 item. So in one of the areas, of course, is discussion on enrollment numbers. And so I would talk a little bit more specifically about that. So our 2nd grade and our 4th grade enrollment numbers at Woodland had gone up early. And so we are recommending that the board adds 1 teacher both at 2nd grade level and at the 4th grade level at Woodland. You have the enrollment numbers in front of you. One of the concerns that we have is early on when we had the 2nd grade and the 4th grade increase in enrollment, we had students that were already in the district. So one of our concerns was moving those students that were already in the district would create a bit of instability for that student. So if they were in 4th grade and we were shifting buildings on them, that's a concern. As we receive new students into the district, we recognize that a student coming into Eagleville and we may move into Woodland wouldn't necessarily know the difference from one school to another. So we're able to do that move now. So you'll recognize when you look at the enrollment numbers that our kindergarten groups are both at, we're looking at 4 seats over capacity in kindergarten at Woodland and 4 seats over capacity at Worcester. Now we're able to make those adjustments, so we're going to have +1 in Worcester and +1 in Woodland, and we're going to be moving 1 student from Worcester to the Eagleville area. We'll be making those adjustments also in 1st grade. So at the 1st grade level, we do not have any room in Arrowhead, Arrowhead, Woodland, or Worcester. So any student coming into 1st grade will be going to Eagleville directly. 2nd grade, of course, we have the added teacher. 3rd grade, we're watching. There's been some discussion both for Woodland and Worcester. And in 4th grade, you'll notice that we have an increased enrollment at Eagleville. I think the board report that you have is 3 seats open. Any students that come in for Eagleville at this point will be moving to Woodland because we have a larger capacity there with the added teacher. Currently, what we're going to be doing is reviewing our Arcola numbers and our high school numbers for class sizes this year to kind of take a look at what our class size numbers are. And for kindergarten, just kind of a follow-up, something that I neglected to add there. One thing that we've noticed in kindergarten is some of our students that come in will often be enrolling in a parochial school. So they might not have that information the moment they're enrolling. So we're not quick to jump on adding any teachers at that level. We want to kind of wait to see what that's going to look like as the year rolls out. Are there any questions at all on enrollment?
Just as a point of clarification, under 10C, these are the 2 positions that we budgeted for this year that we said we were going to hold unless we really needed to put them in place. So these are within the budget. You are aware that we held these 2 positions, and we did hold off as long as we felt reasonable to do so. But it is our recommendation at this time that you would consider them next week. So we want to answer any questions that you have with enrollment or anything that Mr. Regina shared with you this evening, or anything about these 2 positions or anything else under personnel for that matter.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So if a new student comes to the district and they go to Eagleville, and that's not geographically their home school, do they then stay at Eagleville, or do they the next year would they, if the opportunity is available, go to their home school?
Yeah, the next year they would go back to their home school, but that current year we would be moving them to whatever school would have the capacity to be able to take the student. We have, just to add, we have had 1 person that we've had to do that to so far, and now that's coming directly from registration. So as people call, we're able to notify them. And as they come in, we've gone down and met with them in HR as well.
So I'm not sure how current these enrollment numbers are. Was this brought through the Education Committee this month?
We had a discussion about how it works, but not this not the numbers that we are given now, and not this in detail as Che is giving.
Okay, so it was more of a theoretical
It was
discussion.
more of a discussion, because we always discuss enrollment, and there were questions from courtesy of the floor about kindergarten and moving kids, but not to this extent, if I'm correct about that. Dr. Katona can add as well, because she was there. But
We did, at that time, the numbers, when was it that we met, 2 weeks ago? The numbers were different then. So we did look at those current enrollment numbers and had that general conversation, about watching it and what we would do if they went to a certain number and so forth, but they've come up since then.
Thursday alone, we had 6 additions to kindergarten. So it seems a little bit late, of course, but as they come in, we're doing our best to be able to keep up with it.
So it sounds like we have pretty low single-digit openings across K through 4, but not just in each building, but across district-wide. It's not like we shut our doors, August 29th and say, that's it, we're not letting in any more students for the rest of the year. So I'm wondering if this might be the time that we need to reevaluate this, because I'm not comfortable with us towing that close to our capacity. I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels on this, but if we're creeping that close to our board cap of 25 before school even starts, and we lose some of our flexibility and agility in adding teachers and classes once school starts. So I would want to maybe open a discussion among the board here about what our comfort level is with this.
We can certainly do that. I just want to make sure that everybody had an answer. They have some other questions that were directly for Mike.
Yeah, if I can get a couple of the other ones out of the way, and then we can discuss. Can you just walk me through again the kindergarten scenario, where in the report that we got, it was -4 and -4 in terms of seats vacant for Woodland and Worcester, and I thought I heard you say +1. So what's the exact change there?
That's correct. So what we'll have in Woodland, since we have 4 teachers and we have 4 seats over capacity, it would add 1 student to each one of those classes. So it would create a +1 dynamic in each one. As opposed to 22 in a class, you would have 23 in each one of those classes.
Okay, so it's not really, the seats vacant isn't changing, you're just upping the class from 22 to 23.
That is correct.
And then it looks like it would actually be, for one class, I guess, is actually going to be 24 in Worcester. Would that be correct?
That's correct. That's actually the one family that we'd moved today.
Okay. In regards to that family, so they're fully aware that if they're being moved for 1 year, they'll most likely go back to their home school the following year.
That's correct.
They're well aware of that. And I guess a lot of this, can be a numbers game to a certain point, but I don't want to lose the educational aspect here. In terms of the additional positions that we're adding here, in terms of the 4th grade, so we're going to add 1 class in Woodland for 4th grade. In terms of the educational aspect of that, does it make sense to add the class in 4th grade when the kids are older? Or, maybe Ms. Katona, or Dr. Katona, if you could speak to this, does it make more sense to provide some relief to the kindergarten levels there? Because, we're at 22, then it's 23, and 24. In terms of if we have a limited number of resources, what's the best educational value that we can add here?
I don't know that I can answer that, definitively. Certainly we certainly want to try to get our, we think about putting our resources into our earlier years to try to build up our students, to the greatest extent possible. I think when in terms of the numbers at 4th grade, I think you have to look at, the big picture. You have to look at, all of the needs of the students, demographics of the students, the mix of the students, et cetera, before you really know what is the best, place to go with this. But I think, these decisions are being made, right now, I think just, Mr. Regina, based on, what we're looking at across the board at that fourth grade level. And, it's very difficult for me to say. It's like choosing a child, it's difficult to say go here or go there when, I think, but I think we need to trust the process of looking at, the numbers as a whole in each of these and making the necessary adjustments, whether with another school or, whatever that might be.
If I maybe can add a little bit to this conversation, I think it's important to know that, and like Mr. Ryan said, it looks like a numbers game right now, but there's as Dr. Catone had mentioned, there's other associated factors. So Mr. Regina is working directly with the building principals in making, the necessary decisions. So when we're talking about, we're going to be +1 in this grade or possibly because that would make sense to keep the child, there and be able to deal with these things, we may need to make as we learn more about the children. Even if we had a class of 20, we might have to make adjustments where we'd have to call and make a recommendation to the board to let us hire an aide to support those things. So when we're talking about these ones and twosies, please know that we deal with this every year, and I think we've done a pretty good job. But while I respect your your concern about this, and it's a legitimate concern because we want to make sure that all our I's and are dotted and T's are crossed. But please know that this is in consultation with building principals, and and that's why we are making the recommendation for second and fourth grade, and it is why we are monitoring this on a daily basis. This is probably one of the most important things that are on our table right now. We've been sharing the updates on a weekly basis with the board. I think that when we get this into the whole conversation about class size, it's in our district with our demographics. Class size isn't at this numbers where we're at right now isn't as definitive in the research as it might be with a demographic of, say, inner city Philadelphia or any other major metropolitan area. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be watching this, but we certainly want you to know that we have our eyes on this, and we want to make sure that in a consultation with our principals, we're trying to make the best decisions possible, not only for the 1 year short-term process, but how does that impact the child going forward, and can we get them back into the buildings of their geographical sending area, if possible. And when we make these decisions, we're also saying, well, if we make this decision in this grade, will it likely carry into the next grade? And if it does, because if there's 4 sections of say, third grade, there's likely going to be that same number of sections in fourth grade unless there's some other major, change in house builds or housing turnover. So there's a ton of things here, but hopefully, some of this information is helpful for you.
Thank you, Dave, for the follow-up information there. Yeah, it's just, part of the job as the board is to ask the important questions and make sure that we're comfortable making the decision here. You did touch on one thing which I wanted to follow. It's not necessarily directed to Dr. Catone, but Dr. Angstadt maybe. You sent us some information regarding some special education in the board memo, and we've talked a lot at the board level and at the education committee level, I believe, about the increasing number of special education students that were identified coming into the kindergarten class. I think Woodland and Arrowhead this year had the 2 highest, total number of students, where Woodland also has the class size issue. So I just want to, again, this is the recommendation from the board or the superintendent, but I just want to make sure that we're 100% comfortable in a higher class size with a higher number of students who require some more need. I just want to make sure that this is the route that we're going here. Okay.
Again, once that's in place, if we need to make adjustments because of some of the things that we find out shortly after student arrival, and even in the next couple of weeks, we anticipate there's likely to be ins and outs both ways. Within the first 10 days, there are on an annual basis, there are a number of students that don't show up. And after 10 days, and after we do the proper homeschool visitor research, and trying to contact the family, those students are, withdrawn from the rolls, and that affects our numbers here as well. And we've seen it in the past where, we anticipated, having some overcapacity, hire a teacher, and we find out by the time the dust settles in the middle of September, late September, we probably could have done without it, but, we're trying to, predict where we're going to land.
And that's why, I guess, the official PD enrollment numbers aren't due until October 1st, right? Just one last question here. I just want to, we have the current numbers here. So as of August 16th, the total number of kindergarten students is 280 students. Do we know if any have registered since then? We're only talking a couple of days here, but...
We have had one additional student registered today from the numbers that you have.
Okay.
But that was as of about 11 o'clock this morning, so
Understand. So 281, and it's my recollection, I think that we had 273 last year.
That sounds about right if I look at the old spreadsheet.
Okay, thank you very much.
I know Mr. Navarette had his hand up, but I didn't want to... Did you have a question? Yeah. Mr. Navarette? No? Okay.
No, I'm good.
I think that...
So I think it's an important point, Dave, that there's been obviously some interest in class size from some of the other schools, at least communicated to the board, that there's a true understanding for the community that it's not strictly a math, that you guys are evaluating. I think Andrea brought this up with Mary at the education meeting about evaluating who's in that class, the amount of... I think the parents have decided to find some of their classes as being very difficult, or some of the high-energy class, or whatever the terminology they've used. I assume that's part of the equation that goes into evaluation also, and making sure that the community understands that it's not just strictly a math. And also, if there's a follow-up to that, is part of the consideration, if you get to the middle of, at the end of September, and we identified that these, whatever class, at what XY school is sitting at 25, and it's a very high-energy elementary group, is there aids or shared aid or recommendations that some other items that you may be considering that you may bring towards the board later in September, October, to support in those resources?
Absolutely. We've done that in the past, and if need be, we'll do that this time. But again, that has to be a conversation that occurs between the building principal and the classroom teacher. That information then is shared up through to special education, through curriculum and HR. And as a cabinet, we evaluate that information and determine whether or not the recommendation should come to the board to get additional staff if we haven't already met the staffing quota for within the budget. So I think we need to go back to the conversation that the board president brought up. So if you wouldn't mind just rephrasing your question again, and we'll get that on started.
Yeah, so my concern, I guess, is what our comfort level is with these numbers and where we're at right now. The other question I have is, what physical space do we have available at any of these buildings should we reach that tipping point? I'm looking at, in Woodland, for example, there's 92 kindergartners and there's 95 second graders. Second grade was up to 5 classes. Kindergarten has not. Kindergarten's still at 4 classes. If we have more students come in for kindergarten, do we have physical space to add more classes at this point, I guess, is the first question, because otherwise there's no point in having the conversation if we're maxed out space-wise. I know, Mr. Regina, that's not really a question for you. You're not facilities. But I'm not sure who would have that information readily available. I know, Mr. Fretz, you're not going to necessarily know what space is there off the top of your head either, but it's something that I think we need to be asking and answering here as a board.
It's a great question, because as we're speaking with the principals, that's the question we're asking them. So as we evaluate the need for these positions and what space that they have, we're talking with the principals about, is there space they already are utilizing for other classes that could be moved, or can we combine classrooms that are using it at multiple periods and shift that around? So it's actually part of the discussion that we have with the principals. At this moment in time, these positions, we do have the facilities to house them. But if we do start adding additional positions, we can look into it. I believe right now we do, but I can't answer that question unless I ask the principal.
So to start the discussion off, the one thing I would like to see, Kim, or actually for Mary and the policy group, is to evaluate the class size, reevaluate, look at the class size and how it's written. I realize that, I appreciate actually that we are using the K to second grade with a 22, but I don't think that's the way the policy, it's a practice actually than a policy. So I would like to get that straightened out to be a little more clear. And also because it makes, it really defines what we want to do educationally, and also defines what type of capacity we do have. So if by chance a board comes in here and defines the capacity in the policy to 35 kids per class, we certainly could have room for, we might have some empty classrooms in that case. You know, educationally, I think it's a broader discussion around putting it all together. But I would like to see us at least revisit the policy, and maybe it comes back the way it's written today. But I would like that tightened up, please.
Is it okay with just as a information, is that what you would like me to do, take it forward to the policy committee and have it looked at? Anybody have any second opinions on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I know that this has come up actually in the past. I think it's actually come up in policy meetings within the last 2 years. One of the things that was holding it back, and Dr. Zerbe, you can probably speak better to this, was the idea of having some of these conversations as a broader education type thing, because we were going to talk about class rank at the same time, and we were going to come back with an education type recommendation, not just in terms of class size. I do think that you can carve out this general niche in the way that the policies are written, but I do know that that was a concern that was voiced in the past, that we wanted to have a broader education type conversation. So just add a little color.
And I would agree that it is important for us to have that conversation. However, that's not going to address the problem for this year. The soonest that would go before the policy committee in a perfect world is early September. It gets, discussed. Even if we move it forward that night, we're looking at November before any changes could possibly be made. But I think that there's a now problem, and then there's an overarching problem, and I think that speaks to the overarching issue at hand, but not so much to the now of the school year that starts next week.
I will just add, and I don't know if this really helps your dilemma. I believe I'm 99.9% sure every district deals with this in end of August, and I'm so glad we're here with those 22, 25 numbers in our minds, with a board that really cares about education and an administration that cares about education, that we're keeping an eye on this. And it's never an ideal world. Like, you know how you have the bubble class, and the bubble class was a little bigger, and you had the glitch with the technology where one grade didn't have the Chromebooks, and then they got it a year later. Like, I think things are never ideal. I'm glad we're questioning it. I will reiterate, I agree with you that it doesn't help us now, but that policy gets solidified, because there are a lot of boards out there very close by not having this discussion and saying, don't add a teacher, don't dare add a teacher. And the fact that we're doing that and working our very, very best is, I don't want to be naive and be too much of an optimist, but I think when I look, I try to make sure it's equal and where we're comfortable. In an ideal world, like I said, in 2000, I was the Class Size Reduction Act teacher, and it would be awesome to have 17 kids in third grade, but it's 2018 and funding isn't where it used to be. So I don't know how to fix your problem, Kim, but I am comfortable with the efforts that we're making. And I'm so glad we added and didn't cut as much as there was planning.
So I think to clarify, my issue isn't just around the class size, it's that we have a disparity in where the openings are. And so when we start talking about a kid moving into a brand new school in a brand new school district who's not going to be going to school with the kids who live in the house next door, that's where I start to feel like, is there a better way that we could be doing this? And
I didn't understand.
yeah, I mean, and I didn't articulate it that way, so it's both. So it's the class size, and it's, I'm envisioning the kindergarten classroom with 24 students and thinking that teacher is going to deserve a medal by the end of the day. And I'm seeing, I'm also thinking about the kids that are new to our district who are not going to be in class with the children that they meet in their neighborhood. And I'm just wondering if we've looked at all possibilities and if we're prepared for the students that move in October 2nd and where are they going to be educated and how are we going to handle all of that?
On a question on that, how does the transportation work in that particular case? So, and a Worcester student needs to go to Eagleville, and they're in the far northeast part of Worcester. Is it the responsibility of the school district to get that student to Eagleville in this case?
If it's a boundary exception that they're requesting, that would be on them. If it's something that the school district is requesting or pushing, then it would be on us.
So when we take a look at, and to answer your previous question here, when we take a look at this and we move a child from one building to another that's outside of the area, we're doing it for a number of reasons. One, we're doing it so that the education of the children in the we call it the home school, is receiving the benefits. Those children are receiving the benefits of the class size that the board so shall afford. And the child coming into the district goes to a building where they're also receiving that same benefit. Because as we start building and adding to a particular classroom, then there's 25 students that are unfortunate to be a part of a larger class size. In this case, and in many cases, and when we deal with this on an annual basis, so none of these scenarios are new, and none of the stuff that we're proposing are new. And have we looked at all different ways of doing things? Yes. We have options. The options are add teachers. The options are add aides. The options are do some of those things, both of those things, and possibly do what we do in some instances where we move children out of their sending areas. And those are the things that we do to support all the families, not just those that are coming in. So there are some drawbacks, and you were clear on what those drawbacks are. There's actually some benefits to this as well. And Methacton, like other districts, has been doing this for a number of years, and it does work. Not everybody likes it, but it certainly does work. And we make every effort to correct that in the path as the child continues through the grade levels. But we can, the challenge that we have is if we start adding, some more teachers to any of these classes, while we can be probably happy, and I know our teachers will likely be happy with class sizes of somewhere in 15, 16, and that will provide an interesting, set of education. But I don't know, where the balance is. I think we already, with the target of 22, I think we're very progressive in considering the needs of all of our students by looking at that, and I think that's appropriate. But yeah, I know this is hard to hard to look at these numbers and say, hey, this is how it's going to be, and we really won't know how this pans out probably until the middle of September, when we can determine all the students that won't be returning. And then we can certainly look at making the necessary adjustments. We may be able to take one or two students out of one class and move them to another class within the same building, within the same grade level, and make those adjustments. And we do that. The teachers are the best at helping us, solve for some of those problems. But that's where we are today. And if there's other direction that you want to take on this, we'll continue to provide information. You'll get another report on this on Friday. Tuesday, we have a voting meeting. If there are any other recommendations, we'll certainly take them from you as a board. We may actually be bringing you, depending on how enrollment goes, we might actually be bringing you different recommendations than what you see on the agenda here today. So there may be a point where we say, yeah, you know what, we need another teacher here, or we're going to have to put an aide here.
Just to follow up with Kim's conversation here, I would just leave it as I voiced my concerns regarding the kindergarten numbers. So if they do start to creep up, or if we do see one or two more come in, I really think that if the option is to me, if you're going to have a larger class size in second grade, or you're going to have a larger class size in kindergarten, and kindergarten, according to the numbers that I was looking at before, has more students who need additional services. To me, it seems that the shift goes to kindergarten. That would just be my, looking at the numbers and then looking at the educational aspect here. To me, that seems true. And a kindergarten student is here for half the day. So you're trying to deal with more kids in even less a period of time. So please keep us up to date. Even if they just change slightly, I really think that this might be one of those things that I may revisit.
Appreciate those comments, and I thank you all for your comments on the matter. I mean, you got to know that we're watching this daily. Mr. Navarrete, comment?
Yeah, I guess to Kim's question about the level of comfort that we have, Ms. Che, can you run through one more time? We're looking at this sheet with enrollment numbers. Can you talk specifically about the plan again for kindergarten and first grade, and what we're doing with those excess students?
Yeah, I can, Ralph. For kindergarten, right now at Worcester and Woodland, any student that is enrolling in either kindergarten at Worcester or Woodland will be moved to kindergarten at Eagleville. This had gone out in an email today to the principals as well as the cabinet, just so we're all on the same page with that. In first grade, if you look at your first grade numbers, we have one seat left in Arrowhead. All of our other slots are filled at Woodland and Worcester, and we have 8 seats open in Eagleville. And those are the most recent numbers, actually, as of today. So first grade is another option, another concern area, I would say, for the board.
So as kindergarten, how did we get to a point then where we put 23 students in a kindergarten class? Because those are all essentially new registrations, right? How did we get to 23?
We had, starting on Thursday, the morning of Thursday last week, we had one additional student. We had 23 in one class and then 22 in the others. We had added, I want to say it's 6 students on Thursday. I'd have to double check the numbers, but I think I referred to 6 students on Thursday of last week, and they went up drastically. We did notify each one of those individuals as they came in that we could be moving them. We'll be making that decision on Monday morning. We spoke with the principals on Monday morning. They had already allotted for the potential of having 23 in a class if necessary, with the understanding that, and after speaking with registration, we'll often notice that as kindergarten students register, as Dr. Zerbe said, within that 10-day period, kindergarten more so than other grades, will notice that students may not be attending, whether they're looking to enroll in a parochial environment or they just aren't necessarily in the district anymore and don't notify the school district. So it is something we didn't want to move too quickly on, but now at this point, now that there are 4 over capacity, we recognize that we have to make a decision, which is why you're seeing it now in this report.
Yeah, and I guess that was my question, is we got to 23 because we believe that we might have people that You guys are more familiar with the numbers certainly than I am, what they look like year over year. But I will tell you that I will not support more than 22 kids in a kindergarten class. I would prefer you to see lower than that, but 22 to me is a maximum. I think we're doing kids a disservice at that age when we start cramming them in. Certainly, when we're talking about up to 24 kids in a kindergarten class, I think that's quite frankly awful.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments on enrollment or anything else related to personnel? That's listed on under item 10.
I know we still have vacancies, I'm sure. Anything pressing, I know they're going to get filled, but I'm just asking, so I know we're going to have additions. What kind of additions are we hoping for next week? I can't keep it all straight. Because, FYI, I got a new job in my district, and they don't have a replacement for me, and I'm stressed over it, even because I'm worried about my colleagues.
We have a few special education positions that we're still looking to fill. Due to our internal transfer process, we do kind of end at a certain area in which people are looking to maybe potentially move into a more attractive certification area than the one they had originally started with the district in. So it's something that we recognize. Our biggest concern, honestly, at this point, are individuals that we're hiring, as Dr. Zerbe stated earlier, are being held for 60 days. So we now have 3 candidates, potential employees, that are being held by their districts for a period of 60 days. So the districts can hold them starting their official resignation with that district, which will be the day after our board meeting. So it's potential, we could not see those people until the beginning of November, specifically.
I appreciate you filling us in, because that does happen everywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, I just got
I'm sorry, we also have a number of support positions that are still outstanding as well. I believe, some teacher aides and, okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one last comment to the enrollment, just real quick. That I just looked at last year's, and I think it's good for everybody to understand, because I think the pattern of last year is very typical to the pattern. So in the number of total students, went up 73 students from August, September. So August 1st to September 1st, and then went down another 31 between September and October. So you get this late surge as you not get, I assume you don't get all the exits in, so you're exaggerating the need temporarily for about 5 weeks in the evaluation, and then once as you said, the dust settles, then it comes back to a more natural number, and that's why it's the October 1st. So I think it's frustrating that it's not an exact science, but it's the human behavior of when registrations and exits are being performed.
Thank you for digging that up, Paul. That gives me some peace of mind. I appreciate it.
Yeah, just one other question. In terms of the open positions, so the Eagleville grade 4 and Woodland grade 4, those positions were filled?
They actually were filled internally. Actually, the Eagleville one, I apologize, is one candidate that we are bringing in. It's for the board's consideration. It's the 4th grade position, and I have to look at the exact number. It's item 6. Letter D, item 6. That individual will be coming in, but will be held for 60 days from the district. So,
okay. And then we're looking.
The 2nd grade position was an internal move from another position under advisement. It's under the superintendent's advisement, but we will be hiring for that position as that person moved from a position to the 2nd grade position.
I got you. And then we're going to be hiring another 4th grade in Woodland now.
Becomes a bit of a domino effect.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just out of curiosity, well, not even just curiosity, is number 6 going to wait until next week to give notice because it's not officially voted on? I mean, I know that's being picky, but...
Fortunately, the HR directors in the other districts have been workable, so we have contacted them to let them know that these are going to be coming to the board's recommendation, and they've been able to post with the assumption that they're going to have a position. So they're trying to move as quickly as possible, but technically by school code, they can hold them to 60 days upon the resignation.
Any other questions on matters of personnel? If not, we'll move on to the next section, and that will be curriculum. Curriculum and programs. So under number 11 is interscholastic athletic schedule. As per policy 123, we have posted to the agenda this evening all of the a listing of the recommended interscholastic athletics in one column, as well as their corresponding schedules that are planned for this year. This is one of the items that's required for board approval on an annual basis. Are there any questions on this particular matter? Please know that once you adopt this, due to weather, other unforeseen circumstances, schedules may change. But I think primarily this recognition and your adoption is designed to make sure that these are the athletic programs for which we're operating in the district, and there's clarity and a confirmation by the board on that process.
Yeah, can I just ask a different question on curriculum at this point? I don't know if it belongs in new business or whatever, but Dr. Cantoni, can you speak towards some of the co-teaching? And are we increasing some of the co-teaching? I think there's some word of some co-teaching going on at Skyview and Arcola, and it was part of the contract. I know the language on the co-teaching about the proper training around that, but just talk around if we're doing anything differently this year or not.
No, there are no new co-teaching positions being added at this time, but certainly anything that is happening, we are always looking at the proper professional development for them and what they need for support. But there was nothing in particular that was added this year.
Any other questions on curriculum and programs? If not, we move on to policy. There are no policies for your consideration, either for first reading or second reading, due to the fact that we didn't meet this summer. Under 13, other gifts and donations, there's a gift for a student clarinet from Tracy Bugash at a value of $30, and there's a donation from Summers Laboratories of Collegeville for $100. If you flip over, there's a donation from Pfizer for a piano, and that is a value of $984.49. Oh.
It's from Plano.
Yeah, okay, good point. It's a little different from Plano, Texas. Okay, I was trying to speed read. Then under trips, you see that there's a request for the Arcola Intermediate School for the Main Exchange Program. This is a program that we run annually. It's a very well attended and an appreciated program supported by the district. And then there's an item under C, district solicitor, and it talks about discussion of the board of renewing or replacing the district solicitor. So just as a word of as some information on that, and we can open the floor for discussion if need be. But you may recall, as a board, I had issued an RFP back in February of 2018, and we had responses from 4 firms in sometime around the middle of March of 2018. The RFP included vendor responses, information related to the services that the firm provides, and who might be the representative solicitor if that firm was selected as solicitor, and costs associated with their products and services that they bring forward. We did provide that information to the board recently. We want to then open that up for discussion if the board so cares.
I had one question. Half of it's on my printer at home, unfortunately, and the other half is here. But I didn't get to read through every single thing, but I read through quite a bit of it. I was surprised by all the respondents being local. Where did the RFP go? How was that handled? Because I was surprised by that.
So the RFP was sent out to most of the solicitors that we found through the Montgomery County Business Managers Association, as well as the Lower Providence Better Business Bureau.
And that makes sense. I had remembered, and I don't know in what capacity, discussing going further. I don't know if that's even possible. And I don't really mind either way. I just, the 4 or 5 that responded were all known to us and everything. I just had 1, 2, 5. No, 4, but 1 was retained. Okay, 4. I don't know. I guess I was looking for a fresh face. Yes.
I just want to, let me just share this. So we had respondents from 4 vendors, including our current, or I'm sorry, we have 4 vendors total. So Fox Rothschild had responded, Rudolph Clark had responded, Deschelle Bartle, and Sweet Stevens. So our current solicitor is Deschelle Bartle. We also use Sweet Stevens and have used. They were former solicitors, and we've also currently used them for special education matters.
So after looking over the RFP responses and in conversations with Dr. Zerbe, my recommendation is that we change our solicitor to Sweet Stevens at this time. I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels about that, but that's the recommendation that I have based on the information, based on my experience working with Deschelle Bartle for the last few years, as well as experience interacting with one of the attorneys at Sweet Stevens.
Just as a follow-up question here, in regards to the RFPs, the responses that we got, Kyle Summers, who was with Bartle's firm before, is now with Sweet Stevens and was the identified solicitor in that RFP is who we would deal with. Is that correct?
It's not in the RFP, but it has been confirmed that he would be our solicitor if that's what we choose.
Okay. And just because some of them were extremely voluminous in nature, do we have a summary just for the board's quick thing for the identified solicitors from Fox Rothschild, Rudolph Clark, and I guess we would continue with Eric Fry for our current firm? Do we know?
They did not specifically state one. I would assume that Fox Rothschild would be Jeff Sultanic. I don't know anyone about the Clark law firm.
Okay, because it looked like in the Fox Rothschild one that Sultanic's name was mentioned, and then there was a second name that was mentioned, so I didn't know if there was a determination there. It was kind of hard to understand that part of it. Just as anecdotal, I know this is kind of new and we can still have this discussion. When Mr. Summers was our solicitor for the period of time that he was here, luckily I had a lot of interaction with him in terms of the policy committee. I was, I would say, perfectly happy with the work that he put in, his preparedness for those policy meetings. We've come a long way from the way we started the policy meetings compared to where we are now and when he left. And I've always been comfortable with him at the table, so based off of the recommendation of the board president, I mean, he's a familiar face to someone that we know from being up here, and I'd support that.
I will reiterate that Kyle Summers has been wonderful because I was part of policy and anything I've ever dealt with him, very, very knowledgeable, always very alert and engaged. I find my difficulty is sometimes the alertness and engagement of some people. How does this work now? Because this is new to us. This was like we kind of had it on the back burner because we had other things to do. So if you make that recommendation, do we then put it on the agenda? And obviously we'd have more discussion based on if needed.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what I'm looking for as I prepare the agenda for the voting meeting is if the board has a recommendation to put on for an agenda, we would put that recommendation on, list the solicitor or the firm, and then take a vote on that. And in the affirmative, we would then contact our our current solicitor, inform them, as well as contact a new solicitor, and we would start working working on a transition plan. And just to give you an idea what a transition plan might look like, it would be my recommendation that any open cases associated with anything going on with the district would stay with the existing firm, and anything new would start. I mean, unless the board sees otherwise, but that's typically how it's done. Otherwise, we'll be spending a whole lot of time and money administratively and taxpayer dollars trying to have someone else relearn months of work that's already going on. So just to give you an idea, but yeah, this evening, while we might not have a determination, I think it's if the board's inclined to make a recommendation and support the recommendation of the board president, then I would move forward with putting the verbiage on as an agenda item. We would likely, if that was the item that we put on, I would likely put that first, or very close to first on the agenda, to be reviewed, and then with the anticipation that it would be voted on and that we need a solicitor sitting with us at the voting meeting, I would probably invite that individual here and not necessarily invite the current solicitor if that's currently an item on the agenda.
And you answered my next question. I was thinking, is it an immediate action?
Yeah, it's certainly awkward, but it's also, it could be challenging, because if we put them on the agenda and we vote it down, then I don't have a solicitor for that evening, which it doesn't mean we can't vote and we can't hold business. It just means that we don't have the support of a solicitor if major questions shall arise.
Yeah, I would recommend keeping Bartles here for the next meeting, so that I think the evaluation of the voting process will evaluate if they'll come back. I guess a couple questions you said about transition. I understand some of the bigger issues around property, but I believe that some are not really that active. So I think that if we do choose to move to a different solicitor, we should evaluate, and not just with a blanket that all open cases stay with the previous solicitor. I think it should be evaluated of what should be, and I would like to see that recommendation beyond just the sort of blanket. I mean, I understand the Shenandoah, for example. The question I have is, I know Sweet Stevens is known as sort of the preferred special education solicitor for whatever reason. They handle those cases more in the Montgomery County. Was there any basis for having a separation of solicitors, or it was just trying to use the best in a particular area? So if we're all in on Sweet Stevens, or all in on Fox Rothschild, or all in by anybody, was there any thought process in saving money, or not having sort of the check and balance, or is just that's what happened?
As part of the RFP process, or based on best practice?
Best on supporting the school district with the best resources, or is it because Sweet Stevens is considered more a special education unit or not? I don't know, but I'm just trying to understand. We had 3 solicitors in the last year, one for contracts, one for special education, and one for litigation, I would say.
Well, certainly, depending on the types of cases, there are benefits to having the best do some of the work. I mean, I'm not saying this in terms of my belief, but there are some that believe that, for example, under Fox Rothschild, Jeff Sultanic, has a reputation for doing contract negotiations. So, I think, formally a board had maybe made a decision based on that. I'm not saying they did. I'm just saying that some boards might, and maybe that's what some people had thought. And the same goes with, so for example, if I think your statement about Sweet Stevens being, well-versed in special education, I think, we keep them for that because of our experience with them on that and others' experiences with them in special ed. When we talk about, for example, tax appeals, it's clear to me, at least in the circles, that Deschelle Bartle is probably the top firm that does that. But I think at any phase or any issue that comes before us, whether it's a matter just for the solicitor or it's for a different firm, we should be looking at where the advantage lies. And if it lies with another firm to do that work for us because they specialize in it and they can bring us that expertise, I would recommend doing that. So I think that's, but on one of the things that was helpful for us in a number of cases, especially with personnel issues associated with those other special ed matters, working with two firms from two different, or two solicitors from two different firms, it allowed us to do checks and balances, and that's been helpful in a number of instances. So, if we do go with one firm, you don't really have that as often. We do spend a little bit more money for that, obviously, because now we got two bills associated with that conversation, but we also have that checks and balance where, the solicitors kind of negotiate that out. There's no pure science associated with some legal matters that come before us. It's what's the best decision and the right action to take at the moment in time based on all the information and the anticipation of how you can, solve the matter or win the case or whatever it may be. So I don't know if that's helpful, Mr. Winters, but that's hard based on the case and the issue. Multiple solicitor firm might be helpful. One might just do the trick. I don't know if there's a one-shoe-fits-all type of answer to that type of questions in all scenarios that we have.
Mr. Never.
Yeah, sorry, I need to unmute over here. A couple questions. One, from the just a strictly financial perspective, there isn't much difference between the two offers. There were other firms that offered an option with a retainer. Do we have an understanding when we look at, the routine hours that are not associated with matters like the fields or Shannonbell, how much of those hours would be covered under a retainer? That plays a significant role in how we evaluate these. I'll ask a follow-up.
Well, the one thing you mentioned is Shannonbell, and with regards to that, there's a separate agreement with the law for the Keystone Realty and how they get handled that, and then we get billed the legal rates associated with that. I'm not sure if that would fall under the retainer. It's my understanding that the retainer would be for general legal advice that you would use each month. It would not be something that you would use for just about anything, just more of a general legal advice.
Yeah, so just the summary that we got, right, lists a whole set of areas of focus, specifically general counsel and ordinance opinions, where certain firms said, hey, we're not going to bill you an hourly rate for those under our monthly retainer. Do we know what percentage of the time spent on those matters? We've got a breakdown of hours associated with deals and right to know. And there's this general category. What else is rolled up in that general category?
While I believe I understand what you're saying, there's a lot of background noise. I'm going to suggest that allow us to administratively go back and look if we can pull that information together for you. What I think you're looking for is, how much time in our previous work could actually fall underneath a retainer matter, and could it be cheaper for us to have a retainer versus do all this stuff on an hourly basis? Is that, shake your head if that's okay?
That's absolutely correct.
So let us evaluate that and have that information prepared for you before Tuesday's meeting, if we put an item on the board, or if we need more time, whatever you need. But I think we might be able to pull that together for you, at least give you an administrative recommendation on that.
Okay, and my second comment then comes to actual performance, and a lot of people have talked about their comfort level with Kyle, and certainly I had a very brief interaction with him before he left and Eric became our solicitor. I do have concerns about some of the opinions that we've received, and notably the trash bin, management that Scarrow based on the solution panel. My question is, though, have we had any conversations, or will we have any conversations with Bartle about improving the core performance before we change suppliers? Because there is, my world, unless there's some big smoking gun issue where we just get rid of a supplier, typically there's some kind of, tip, for lack of a better word, where we give them opportunity to either replace an individual or improve performance. I don't know that jumping and replacing solicitor without doing that first would be appropriate.
I can tell you that we have not had that conversation.
I will say that we did previously, when I guess my term first started on this board, we had Frank Bartle at the table with us, and I believe that there was a discussion at that time that we wanted someone else to be sitting at the table, and that was when we had Kyle Summers. So I don't know that there was a conversation that was had at this point. And in my opinion, I'm looking at this as I would even in my personal life. If I have a relationship with a professional, my relationship is with that professional. It's not necessarily with the company for whom they work. If my doctor switches practices, I'm going to go where that doctor has gone, not necessarily stay with the same practice. So to me, this switch is about going to work with the professional with whom I feel we have a relationship, who we have built a good work history with. I've been very impressed with the depth of his and breadth of his information regarding school code, regarding policy. There have been very few times in the months and I guess years at this point that I worked with Kyle that I felt like I was lacking for an answer. And for those reasons, I do want to see us switch to Sweet Stevens to be with Kyle Summers again.
Yeah, Kim, I agree with everything you said about Kyle. It's been my experience too with him, and I'm entirely comfortable as a solicitor. But I do think that there needs to be, just like anything, if your doctor's not quite cutting it, are you just going to go and go see another doctor immediately? Or are you going to find out what the issue is? Maybe doctor's a bad analogy there because it's a different type of situation. But because as I say it out loud, I think I would absolutely go see a different doctor immediately. But I do think there's a conversation, though, that needs to be had. I agree with your logic, though.
If I can just jump in real quick to follow up with two things that Ralph had mentioned. In the information that we got, our current firm did not offer the retainer option. It was offered for Rudolph Clark and Fox Rothschild, and different items were included in each of those. So some would include policy review, others would not. So I think if you're going to go back to the current firm to ask any questions about a retainer, I don't even know that was an option from their standpoint. And Tim, as you're going back and looking at any of the financial information or the bills and stuff, I use the word of caution from the conversation we had from last month, because we know that there's billing issues with the firm in terms of timeliness of receiving the bills and when we're paying the bills and everything. So I think we were sent information months ago which would have been as of a certain date, but it was really because we hadn't received bills that would have covered that period of time. So please make sure whatever information you bring up and put forth to the board, that it covers truly what should have been captured during that time frame, because I know we have some issues there.
We did make a final call because of the year-end numbers to make sure everything was in for year-end, so everything was posted as year-end.
From now, so last month, we caught the information going back close to 6 months worth of...
Yeah, that goes down to the billing where they just do a summary bill not the detail, and I don't pay without the detail.
As well, you should not. Thank you, Tim.
I'm sorry, I have to get a sign made for you for that. I don't pay without the detail. I like that. I'm going to get you a sign.
Are there any other comments, or does anyone have an objection to placing this item on the agenda for next week? Not to say that we can't continue to have discussion next week, but I just want to make sure that we have a comfort level.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I think I don't have a problem with moving forward with at least having the discussion and maybe a vote next week, but I don't know what the voting item would read. Or we would decide to put a voting item on the agenda or have a holding spot. But, somebody might want A, somebody might E, somebody want...
So my recommendation is that we put Sweet Stevens on the agenda for next week. The voting item would say to appoint Sweet Stevens as our solicitor. Because with our current firm, we don't have a term on the agreement. I believe it's kind of, there is no agreement, so it's just going forward until we decide otherwise.
Is there...
I'm sorry, and that would actually be similar with other firms if we do an hourly basis. There's really just a confirmation of the hourly rates associated with the different services, and we recognize those things, and that's what we would, it's not really a contract. But if we do a retainer, that would be a different story.
That was my question.
Then that ends the agenda items. There's dates for board members.
No, I'm sorry, there's not the time for calling out. There was no vote taken.
Yeah, if I could just be clear, what all I'm doing is getting recommendation from the board to place an item on the agenda for consideration at a vote next week.
So what was that, consensus?
So we'll go on to dates for board members' calendars. We go on to old business, new business, courtesy of the floor. I'll turn it back over to the board president.
All right. Any members of the public who'd like to address the board for courtesy of the floor? Mr. Bickelman.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I wasn't prepared to speak at this courtesy of the floor. I was prepared to speak at the first meeting's courtesy of the floor. I don't know if what I have to say is pertinent to this courtesy of the floor, but I'll throw it out there for the heck of it. I think you taking the courtesy of the floor off the first agenda says a lot about what you think about what the public says, because there's probably 12 minutes that you cut off that, and it just says a lot about how you feel about the public comments. You change the format of the agenda. It's the first time I ever saw a courtesy of the floor taken off an agenda like that. So I would have loved to hear the discussion that went on between you and the superintendent. Ms. Larson needs to get that off the agenda. But it's a shame you took it off for 12 minutes of democracy being exhibited here in this room. I think you should just cut the solicitor off and, just send the box of open cases to the new solicitors. That's what I think. I knew somebody that was going through a 6-year custody battle and never got settled, going through the process in Berks County, never got settled. This person changed lawyers, and in 2 weeks, everybody was happy. Agreements were signed. Imagine that. We're hiring somebody at step 7 for a 4th grade position. That's like halfway up the charts. I don't know if that was to steal somebody from another school district or what. I'd like to commend Mr. Bricker on his job that he's doing with the transportation, the budget, starting up a new year, looking at all the detail. Hopefully the detail that you get from the lawyers' offices says the number of hours and what they're working on, and that you scan it and send it to the superintendent and anybody else in cabinet that should review each item and okay each item. But you're doing a great job, and I'm glad to see that you're getting a raise here of $5,600, or consideration of a raise of $5,600, and you're closing in on that starting salary for the new guy at Colonial who got hired for $170. So, hopefully you'll attain that someday. I think you should have an agreement with the solicitor. I think they should be appointed every year. Sultanic's firm was appointed every year at Colonial. The rates would go up a little bit, $5 an hour or whatever, but we did have a retainer, and he was appointed every May, and he appreciated the appointment every May, so you should have a contract with the solicitor. The other thing I think I'd like to exhibit, my wife took the football team to the movie tavern on the 17th, Friday, I think, and they saw the movie Remember the Titans. So she did that summer trip, and she was impressed with the way the young men handled themselves. She saw a lot of manners, respect, and the new coaches greeted her, and she really had a good time. They asked her to come in and see the movie, have some lunch, and she really enjoyed that trip, and I just want to let you know that the young men are to be commended for that. All right?
Dr. Malik.
Jim Malik, Worcester. As far as the solicitor goes, there is a relationship. It's Democrat-Republican. So, it's a charade. As far as the board goes, I keep asking, when are you going to pass a policy on the board members violating board policy? Is that ever going to happen?
It's not something currently on the agenda.
Well, you should put it on the agenda instead of getting rid of the solicitor. Because my question is, who made the decision not to put courtesy of the floor on the special meeting agenda? Was it you or was it Dr. Zerbe?
Dr. Malik, I really don't want to get into a back and forth with you, but I will say that the decision to move courtesy of the floor to the second meeting came out of discussion that we had here at a board meeting about the will of the board and how we handle courtesy of the floor with a special meeting.
It's not the will of the board decision, hate to tell you. And if you do the will of the board, it's got to be done by vote, motion second, or a policy. So I don't think you know what you're talking about again. But at the 619 special meeting, you unilaterally moved courtesy of the floor to the work session. You remember that. According to the solicitor, it is in our policy, it's in your policy, that courtesy of the floor can be postponed to a future meeting if time permits, with the meeting immediately following and combined with courtesy of the floor. Well, you know what policy that is, don't you? Policy 903, okay? According to that policy, if the board determines there is not sufficient time at a meeting for public comments, the comment period may be deferred to the next regular meeting. That's board policy 903. That's why I said you need to pass a policy, because you violate board policy all the time. You just did it again tonight. 9 o'clock, 2 hours, could have got it in. Way back when, you on your own, unilaterally, back on 619, without the board, moved the policy back. You violated board policy. There was plenty of time to have courtesy of the floor. I'm going to call you the habitual board policy violator. Now, I guess my question is, where's the new M&M study? We aren't going to talk about it? I'm sure you don't want to talk about it. When did who instructed the M&M? Who gave them the parameters? Can you tell me? Dr. Zerbe, did you give it to them, the parameters? For the study? When was the study? When did M&M give you the study? Can you tell me? When were they given the go-ahead to do the study? Can you tell me?
Dr. Malik, I wouldn't expect Dr. Zerbe to have this information off the top of his head.
When did you give him the go-ahead? Are you aware that the study is flawed? Are you aware it's flawed? Have you seen it? I have. It's flawed. I can prove it. It's flawed. $3,000. $3,500. It's flawed. Do you know it's flawed? Do you know where it's flawed?
That's a matter of opinion.
Do you know where it's flawed? I already contacted the Department of Health. I can prove it. Are you aware of it? Why don't you go read it? I'm going to object under 710.1C. With regards to the solicitor situation, what was this fiasco going on up front here? Can you explain it to me? The violation of the Sunshine Law, where you made the motion about putting this solicitor thing, moving it forward? How'd that come about?
There was no motion made this evening.
What did you say when you said, I think we should move it forward at the next meeting?
Dr. Malik, I'm sure you can review your tape when you get home this evening. That's not what I said.
What did you say?
Could you please wrap up?
I'm objecting under 710.1C that you guys up front went ahead, basically took a vote to let Dr. Zerbe put it forward and didn't allow public comment. That's my objection. Now, Dr. Zerbe, without public input, would you have put that study forward? Would you have put the motion forward? Without your input, all of you voting for it or putting your input positive forward, would Dr. Zerbe move forward? What was this, a straw vote? What was it? That's what I wanted to know. What was this called? What did you call what you guys did?
A discussion.
A discussion. So how does Dr. Zerbe know to move forward? Can you tell me that?
The agenda is created with the board president and Dr. Zerbe in consultation.
Well, everybody up here was discussing it, not just you and Dr. Zerbe.
Dr. Malik, can you please wrap up?
I'm trying to find out exactly what you did. If you can explain to me how Dr. Zerbe now knows after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people minus 1 saying yes, he should put it on the agenda is no different than a vote, I'd be more than happy to sit down without public comment.
Dr. Malik, you've been to enough board meetings. You should know how a vote takes place, and this was not a vote.
Well, what was it then? Please explain to me what it was.
This was a discussion.
A pure discussion. Okay. And that's what you think it was? Okay. I got you. You do need a solicitor.
Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. Does the board president have a copy of the Sunshine Act? Has the board president read the Sunshine Act? The Sunshine Act requires public agencies to hold certain meetings and hearings open to the public and providing penalties. The meeting policy was changed a few months ago. One thing that was eliminated was to have the board vote to approve the agenda at the start of a meeting. That's done in a number of school districts. It's an issue that Methacton had a policy that was not followed in that regard. The general rule is the public is allowed to discuss matters of concern. And in a comment period. And the Sunshine Act allows that courtesy of the floor may be deferred. Those are the exact words. So when you defer it from, let's say, the special meeting this evening to the working session this evening, my understanding of the English dictionary is that there can be 8 minutes allowed per your rules, per individual. Otherwise, you're not respecting that some of the courtesy of the floor was deferred from the special meeting to the working session meeting. Does that make sense? And also, the Section 714, penalty, says any member of any agency who participates in a meeting with the intent and purpose by that member of violating this chapter commits a summary offense and shall, upon conviction, be sentenced to pay a fine not exceeding $100 plus costs of prosecution. I have this discussion because this is a serious matter that some members of the board apparently treat as petty. That is wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Any comments from the board?
Just real quick, I know we're going to be back here next Tuesday before the official start for students, but thanks in advance to everybody's hard work already getting the school year start, and good luck to the teachers and staff for their in-service on Monday and Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Reese, can I get a motion to adjourn? And Mr. Ryan, and a second. Ms. Reese, meeting is adjourned. Everyone have a good night.